All right, so open the meeting of the planning board for Monday, October 7th, 2024 at 6:05. And we'll start off with the preamp.
Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Act of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person as courtesy by a remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance in our participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and a board member, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by using the Zoom information. You wish to visit the local scene media Duxbury for information on Duxbury programming, including streaming and launch.
Excellent, thank you. Next item we have is our open forum. This is for anything not currently on the agenda. Anyone on the board have anything?
I have one update,
Okay,
diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion. We have well, we got a grant a while back. We have finally engaged a consultant. I don't remember the exact name, but they're out of UMass. Julie Cornis is really leading the effort here, and we are in the process of engaging their services to provide training that will be first rolled out to town employees.
Mhm.
And specifically targeted, like, emergency responders will get a different type of training than
Okay.
School and other town officials. So that's in order.
excellent. I'm gonna get into your stuff.
Yeah,
Do you have anything new?
I do have something that, it's been on my mind, and so I don't know if this is out of order, but the application window for CPC projects closes on the 15th, okay, so that's about a week away. And there's an idea that's been rattling around in my brain because of the planning deficit, that the town ought to put together a proposal, and I would suggest that it should come from the planning board, but it doesn't have to, okay? For a project, including funding of a consultant for community planning that would include the housing production plan implementation and a lot of the public safety and accessibility and connectivity goals that are in the comprehensive plan, because these are all things that are,
Mhm.
that have been prioritized, that are top of the list, that we need to get done, and there's nobody doing it.
Yeah.
And if we had, essentially a steering group, not a working group, not a committee, a steering group, to ride herd over the consultant and provide continuity as we transition between planners,
Mhm.
to get this work moving,
Mhm.
we would at least get off the dime. So this is the thought, and I
Okay.
apologize for not bringing it sooner.
No,
And I realize it's too late for the planning board to actually
Mhm.
put the application in, but it is just an application, which then goes through CPC review and all this other stuff
Okay.
before it even gets.
And that has to be there before the 15th.
Well, if it- So I
And
could
CPC funds could be used for such.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly for housing, recreational use, public safety connectivity is a part of it.
Okay. Okay,
I know we can't engage on the topic.
Yeah.
Just put it on.
we'll bring that up for our next. Put that on the agenda for the next meeting to.
I suggested, I will draft it and circulate it so that it's in before the deadline. And
Okay.
if this board says, no, that's actually is a bad idea, we'll just pull it.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
Did you say October 15th?
Yes.
Coming right up.
Are you proposing that you would actually, our next meeting is the 21st, right?
Correct.
So you're proposing you'll just send it in?
To make the deadline, as a placeholder.
Be a placeholder and we can make amendments to it. Certainly. Yeah. Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Anything this side? Nothing? Wayne, anything?
Nope.
Next item up. Introductions. Rebecca Rowley, our new planning director. Moving off intro. Yes, yes. Anyway, if we just cross that out, it makes it real, right?
Interim planning director.
Yes.
And my name is pronounced roughly,
Oh,
so I'll
sorry.
correct you.
Absolutely.
We'll start with that.
Horrible with names, so.
I have a background in planning and zoning, and was an assistant town administrator for a little while, so HR and project management. And mostly procurement is actually my really strong suit, but I much enjoy planning and zoning, and I hope that whatever time that I'm here for, I can be assistance to all of you and help you move your projects along as best as I can. Huge learning curve with the MBTA coming in at the fourth quarter, I feel like, but
Yeah.
Emily's great, and she definitely's been getting me up to speed, and so far, so good.
Excellent. Have you met everybody from the board already?
If you could just go through one more time so that I can, if that's okay, I know I didn't meet you at the end.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll hit Wayne.
Wayne and I did have a meeting on Friday,
Okay,
I did meet him.
Rebecca, I'm not ready. Nice to meet you.
Lawrence Roy. Kristen Rapp, great to have you on board.
Scott Kessler. Thanks.
Jen Turcott, nice to meet you, welcome to the board.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. So right into it then. The next item is MBTA community zoning for a special town meeting article. And we're basically looking to vote to submit the bylaw amendment request to the select board, who will then in turn take it back to us and the public hearings. So do we have, how far do we want to go into this as a board right now? We have all, everybody's got the draft. And then the circulated, did everybody get the circulated information from town council as well?
No,
Okay.
because we had a working group meeting just before, so we
Yeah.
don't wanna confuse
Yeah, we don't wanna
everybody with
confuse the
multiple drafts,
Yeah.
So.
So it'd be better to wait to actually look at the town, with the working group, the next draft, or would it help to look at this draft?
We have to reflect it now,
Okay, okay.
Yeah. just the way it is. We're not changing anything. Nope.
Okay.
So there will be more work going on with it, obviously, because there'll be more in between,
Okay.
between time and then. I mean, we get the placeholder and everything else. There's still room to make changes
So we're voting to submit the bylaw amendment request to the select.
to the select board.
And then select board, and then any amendments will be handled by the select board as it moves through the process.
No, they're gonna kick it right back to us. This is just procedural.
Okay.
We need to kick it to them, they get it onto the agenda, onto town meeting, and they kick it back to us, and we have the public hearings.
Gotcha.
The public prior to the public hearings and public hearings, we can take amendments. That's the game, that's the plan. So basically, this is really just procedural issue that we're doing. Not getting in the weeds on it. Per se.
So let me,
Yes.
okay, offer to the planning board that we're well ahead of the game, because while you're discussing the idea of submitting an amendment, we have been drafting an amendment, and we are 80% of the way, 90% of the way through that. We have had one round of review from town council, has gone through the working group and the consultant in collaboration just half an hour ago. We'll go back to the consultant and back to legal and then back to the working group on Wednesday,
Mhm.
so that at the time the working group presents it to the finance committee on Thursday, we'll know what's in it.
Okay.
Pretty much. That's where we stand.
In the meantime, we need to do this now because the select board is gonna be looking at it. You see, correct?
They're gonna be doing the same thing you are, they're
Yeah.
gonna, it's gonna be short, and they're gonna refer it back to
Yeah.
you for a public hearing.
So I would like to move that the planning board submit a bylaw amendment request to the select board, notifying them that we intend to amend the bylaw.
Second.
Discussion.
Can we have some discussion?
Just calling for that now.
Is it possible to have some discussion around this motion?
Yes.
If the question is simply whether we're going to submit to the select board a desire to amend the bylaw, I have no reason to oppose this. However, I have been provided a draft bylaw and a draft overlay district map. And if what the planning board is doing is endorsing those, I will oppose it.
So they're kind of two topics, right? One is the procedural part right now, and the second part is the discussion. Is that what I'm hearing, Wayne?
We wouldn't be endorsing anything until we finish up with the public hearings.
So the other issue for me, and I want to be cognizant of the very hard work that the MBTA Communities Working Group has engaged in. The notion that we are, quote, ahead of the game is so far off the mark, it seems incredible to me. This is a law that we knew to come into existence, that we've done very little about as a town, that when I came onto the planning board some months ago, we had already developed some overlay districts, but we were way behind any other, lots and lots of other communities. And now we're in the position of asking for potential extensions. We aren't way ahead of any game. We are grossly behind the game. And quite frankly, my principal concern is twofold. I think that the overlay district map burdens a particular community in a way to benefit particular landowners that should not exist. And my understanding of how the process was supposed to work was that the town planner at the time proposed some areas, including areas that I thought were difficult to develop. But it seems incredible to me that any overlay district that doesn't include the already for sale Miramar property is wrong. The Miramar property is closer to services than properties in in some of the properties, the largest piece of developable property in the overlay district. And I am very uncomfortable with burdening this community with that level of density without significant public input.
Well, quite frankly, as far as, I think, the comment that Tag made about us being ahead is a bit, it was facetious, can't speak. Yeah, and at the same time, a bit of, we're on the truncated schedule that we had left, we're ahead of that, basically, by a day or two.
Yeah, we're ahead of a schedule we never should have been on.
We should have ended up with, but we ended up with that
Right.
because of, quite frankly, staffing issues. So that's where we ended up. The idea that we're going to get an extension from the state, we made the plea, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's a pipe dream.
Yeah, they more or less said, they didn't say it yet, but they more or less said it when we had the meeting. So that's not gonna happen. So we need to push forward with, where we were going. And it was Chris's suggestion after he left, because he wasn't gonna be able to assist us anymore, that a working group be formed, and that's what was formed to push us forward to this point. Now, I would argue the working group has done a lot of work in a short amount of time, to get us what they have now. And we need to keep moving forward, and the arguments on the maps, I mean, there were a bunch of different locations we looked at. When Chris was the town planner, we had narrowed it down to roughly 3. Of which Miramar was not part of that initial discussion that we had, but we did have three locations.
What, Scott, you say it wasn't part of the initial discussion, except I raised the issue contemporaneously. I discussed it. And I'll tell you one thing, whatever we're gonna refer to this, the Bonji's property was never part of an initial discussion.
Correct. Correct.
And so what we've settled on, and I do not mean to diminish the very hard work of the MBTA Communities Working Group, because they have been working hard. But what we've settled on is a piece of property, a large portion of property that, quite frankly, is the only developable property of any real magnitude under the proposed overlay district, without meaningful analysis of the burdens that that level of density places on neighbors. And I'm extremely concerned about the way this process has gone forward. And frankly, if you say what we're voting on is whether we should tell the select board that that we would like to propose a zoning amendment, okay, I'll say yes to that. I'm going to say no to the amendment that's been provided. And I'm going to say no on both on the zoning map reason, and because I think the site plan review process, which just adopts our administrative site plan review under the zoning bylaw, is insufficient and actually inconsistent with what other South Shore communities have done.
Oh, I would hesitate to speak for the working group. The chair is responsible for that. I appreciate everything you're saying, Wayne. And first I'll apologize for being flipped in my comment. It was an attempt at humor, all right, in terms of.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be candid. I'm sorry I picked up on it in that way, but I will tell you, I've had very, very direct conversations with people who are deeply into the planning community, who have expressed to me extreme dismay at the manner in which this board, our board, has approached this problem.
Well, I think they were going to have that dismay no matter what with this MBTA community situation. The town, most of the town doesn't appreciate the way it's having to be dealt with in the first place. So, I mean, the background pieces that we have to put around before it can get to a public hearing is what has to happen. That every single meeting and every decision that's made on it isn't made by the same guidelines as the public hearing itself would be. The working group's an open group, anyone can attend. People, as we know, don't. There hopefully will be a good turnout when we actually have our public hearing for it. But as with a lot of zoning endorsements, we may see very few people until we get to town meeting, and that's where they ask all their questions.
Yeah.
That's routinely the process, but I know the working group has been reaching out to the community. We've been doing what we can through the news and with our websites and everything else. And the public hearings are really gonna be the first time we're gonna have that ability to bring everybody else in on this. Just like anything else that we're doing. The working group had reached out to numbers of different stakeholders and everyone involved.
So I raised this question largely because I wanted to know what we were voting on.
Now,
So are we voting on recommending to the select board that we amend the bylaw? I fully support that motion. If you are asking me whether we are voting on the recommending to the select board that the bylaw ought to be amended consistent with the draft and the map that's provided me, I will oppose.
I would personally, I would love to talk more about like our position and our thoughts and about and so on about but would it make sense to break apart the two and vote on the procedural? Because does the select board need to have this response by a certain time from us tonight?
They don't have many items on their agenda and they start at 6:30,
Okay,
so. It's just procedural, it's not the
Well,
recommendation.
procedural, but that's not what Wayne's asking.
well,
If our procedure is that this is what's gonna go over there, he's not in favor.
he.
And I don't know what else we're gonna send him, because we don't have anything else.
We don't have anything else.
It's
And I asked that clarifying question to council and she said, put in the packets what you have so far. Because this should have been done a long time ago. That's the issue.
So
Is
Wayne,
that when you're amending this, you should, when you're starting this process, you should already have the final draft.
Yep.
But you don't.
We don't,
so Wayne,
You have to be in
but we have to get
compliance with the timeline.
on there for the timeline. And they're giving us the ability, usually the select board would not allow the ability for you to make a bunch of changes to these things, but they are giving us that ability.
so Wayne, can I ask you a question? So if you know that we are planning to vote, and this is the likely what we're going to, the proposal that we would recommend to the select board, would you say no to, is this a fair question? Would you say no to, voting on this procedural vote?
If the procedural vote is a recommendation as to the draft bylaw and the draft overlay district that I have been provided, I would not support submitting it to the select board.
Okay, that's 1 out of 7.
Gotcha, that's what I.
He's more than allowed to, everybody votes their conscience.
I heard, I thought it was a tree, sorry, I didn't, okay, got it.
Yeah, I thought it was just notification.
Yeah, so,
It's notification to the select board, but this is what we're sending. At the end of the day, sending them this document to reserve a spot on the town meeting. Upcoming town meeting for this. So again, changes are going to be made because things have been sent to town council, and town council has come back with recommendations. And the consultants and the working group are working on that as well. So what we'll be looking at by the time we get to the public hearing will be a different. The document, but changed.
So then we can't make a recommendation to approve this document, right? We can only do a procedural notification, because we actually don't have the final.
Yeah, we're not asking them to approve this, we're asking them to approve the function that we're doing.
And so just so I'm clear, we take
I'm not that
this
clear on
procedural
it
step,
myself.
we get another working draft with outside counsel's comments and any comments, revisions from the group for the public hearing.
Yeah.
Are we then, as a planning board, having a formal subsequent meeting and a formal vote to approve or disapprove the final form of the amendment for the special town meeting? Will there be another town, planning board meeting after the
Yes.
public hearing?
After the public, we usually do it during the public hearing.
During, okay,
During the public
so at the public hearing, during the public hearing is when Wayne and the rest of us
We should,
will vote on the final form.
we have this now, we should have a change to this that we will be presenting to the public hearing.
Yeah.
And then we'll deal with what happens at the public hearing.
Okay.
And in that light, I wanna make sure everybody's aware that there is a scheduled joint working group and planning board meeting on Wednesday.
At 5 o'clock.
Where we will be looking at this in detail.
But wait, for now, we're kicking it over to them so they can do what they need to do to kick it back to us. That's generally what we're doing.
Fine, I understand what the vote is and thank you for the robust discussion.
Okay. So, we had a motion and a second. We had discussion. Are we ready for a vote? More discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. Roll call vote, please. Wayne?
Wayne Dennison votes no.
Okay. So way right down the line.
Matthew Ray, aye.
all right, sorry, Kristen Rath, I,
Scott Castagrande, aye.
Take care, Brian.
Jen Chuckout, I.
So. Emily, email it over.
1 minute to spare.
Okay, all right.
But do you mind if I, since we're on sort of on this topic and
Sure.
kind of to Matt's point, I think what you're kind of getting at is, will we have any time for discussion?
Yeah, we just didn't vote aye on the final form of the amendment. We simply took a procedural vote to submit this so that the planning board, the select board can formally add this to the town planning, special town meeting agenda, and then it's gonna come back to us.
Ideally,
discussion.
this would always be in our final form by the time we send it to them, but that's not the situation we're in right now, and we're working it back and forth as best we can to get there, and the select board has given us the leeway to be able to do that, to try to get this, on the timing. As I said, we did have a meeting with the state group requesting the timelines. They seem sympathetic to what we had gone through as far as changes and having interim personnel and et cetera, but at the end of the day, they were like, there's been 2 years. And some places jumped on it sooner than others. We initially, from the beginning, were doing a little bit of a waiting game on it to see, would it get extended, would this get thrown out? This isn't an easy item for the town to digest, so.
And not to get down a rabbit hole, but to bring up a point that Wayne brought up, I still would like, from a legal perspective myself, would like to dig in and read this final amendment a little bit further, especially with regards to the site plan design review, because that's really where the town is gonna maintain any sort of teeth if this gets passed. Are any of the changes that were referenced in the last 24 hours, Ted, do you know, is it with respect to the site plan review provisions of the amendment?
No.
Okay.
This is one of those things, we have to be careful how much we try to restrict this, we can't do too much to it, it's by right. It's by right. Okay,
It's by right, but I'll tell you this, I've already seen EOHLC approve fairly stringent site plan review in other South Shore communities.
I think a lot of our site plan review as it is right now is considered somewhat stringent, so we'll see, let's see what we get when we get that back from the back and forth that's happening now, and Wednesday, hopefully we can get a lot more answers for ourselves.
Yeah, I just want to say one more time that I do not mean to diminish in any way, and in fact applaud the hard work of the MBTA Communities Working Group. I just don't like where we're at, and it has nothing to do with that.
I think I understand. Do you mind, but, when you brought up a question, I do want to ask Tag, maybe you can provide some color. Was the Miramar property ever mentioned? And or maybe this is a Scott question, do you recall, did that ever come up in our conversation with Chris? Because I don't feel like it ever did.
I don't remember if it did, a lot of the open larger properties were discussed. In fact, if you're gonna discuss Miramar, why not the Reed property? Just as big, in fact, it's bigger, it has more buildable land, so there's a lot, that's out on the end of Standish. 40 acres out.
It's not 40 acres, it's about 12 acres, but if the town's gonna take the Reed property by eminent domain, people are gonna have to finance something north of $25 million to do so. The asking price right now is 40 million.
Yeah.
Just to address the question
Yeah,
directly.
if you don't mind.
One of the earliest actions of the working group was to look at all 10 sites town-wide and consider all of the factors bearing on the decision of what does it mean in terms of meeting the charge of minimizing the impact to the town.
Mhm.
So there are so many factors that depending on how you weight them, you get a different answer. But at that time, we were emphasizing the primary objective of connectivity to public transportation and concerns about impact on the aquifer and the water supply. And in terms of those two concerns, when you looked at the set of sites across the town, it made the most sense to focus on the lower left-hand southwestern quadrant. So at that time, it was Miramar, the town line site at 5 Kingstown Way, Babanji site. And actually Hall's Corner would be in the mix with
Yeah,
that.
that was in there.
So that was sort of the inflection point. And then from there, we arrived at a recommendation from Paul to pursue Babanji's. And that's how we got here. So it was verbally discussed, but not analyzed in any degree of detail, I think would be the answer.
Well, I think some of the idea behind bond use too is there was a little bit of discussion about making that sort of a town center, that was already on 50.
Well, yeah, the fact that there was a plan done in 2018 that visualized a new community there, I think might have made it seem more attractive. That's just a guess.
Matt, do you mind if I ask you, are there, as the non-lawyers in the group are reading through this, are there some things that you would want us to think of?
No, I would like to see. And I haven't compared this, the site plan review language that's in the draft amendment. And Scott made the point that it's as of right, but at the same point. So isn't our site plan review for other projects are as of right. Did they simply take the site, and I haven't compared the two, have they taken the site plan review guidelines in the existing code? And just transplant them into the draft amendment? Or the
Yes,
site-
Matt, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to clarify too, because there is a section of the bylaw titled site plan review, which is procedural.
Right.
You're not proposing any changes to that, and I'd ask you, Wayne, actually, is that what you're alluding to? Should there be changes to the site plan review procedures in the bylaw?
Yeah, I spent some time trying to figure out what other procedures, for instance, the town of Braintree has adopted and have been approved. I'm gonna tell you, I didn't get fully through that exercise. But I think we can firm that up a little. That never was my principal concern. I'm very, very concerned about the overlay, about the overlay map. Because for all intents and purposes, this is a burden we're putting on one community.
But no matter where we do it, we're gonna have that same conversation.
That's not true.
This is the only parcel of 20 acres, as I understand, so.
Yeah, I got it.
Are impacting multiple neighborhoods. In terms of,
We're gonna talk more about this, I'm sure.
look forward to it. So just the final point, I guess, and we should move on. In terms of the site plan review, the controls are in the design section of the overlay. And at this point, they are simple Euclidean zoning controls, setbacks, building heights, floors. That's it. It's our understanding that one of the options available in current best practice is something called design-based code. And I feel it's fairly straightforward and within reach, but everyone is very tentative about this. Design-based code fundamentally is a few things. One of the things is it specifies a half story on the top floor, which eliminates the possibility of a flat roof. Another thing is it suggests constraining the square footage of the building. You can have multiple buildings, but you can't have one giant building with thousands and thousands of square feet. Because that forces the developer to compromise to meet the unit count, provide square footage, and not overbid fundamentally, which should aid in, I'm not gonna use the term affordability, but it should aid in producing market rate units, which are lower than average price, let's say that, as opposed to being above average price, because they're very low. And then the other suggestion in design-based code is simply to address the profile, the plan profile to eliminate contiguous street stretches of wall. As jogs, alcoves, offsets, things like that. So that's the basics. Design-based.
And that's something we're allowed to put in.
And I don't know if that would address your concerns, Wayne, in terms of the site plan review.
I think it in fact would, but it would. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more discussion about this.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Next item, our administrative items. We have CBA case 2024-18, variance for 21 Hummock Lane.
Do we have the owner?
Oh. Do we have anyone here for this property?
I have a question.
I had a question as well. I don't, there's an existing shed there and they're rebuilding the shed. Why aren't they just looking to go before the ZBA for a non-conforming approval?
I thought it was that the building inspector was called and they were then told to remove it because it was not compliant.
That's my other question.
but it's been there for 40 years. according to this.
Right.
Lots of things that have been there for 40 years aren't compliant.
Right,
So I don't know that there wasn't enough information in here for us to really. I think get into the weeds on it, and the fact that they applied for a variance seems strange. If they could prove a pre-existing structure in that location and they just want to replace the broken down shed with a new shed. That would customarily be something you just bring before the zoning board of appeals. As a pre-existing non-conforming shed, I want to put another non-conforming shed on the spot. So, I'm not really sure what they're looking for here. My thought was most likely just to question that point that question out to the zoning board of appeals and defer.
yes, this is a violation notice, so.
Get a violation notice on a 40-year-old shed, that doesn't make a lot of
Doesn't
sense.
make a lot of sense.
But there's more to this, and we don't have them here for us to be able to make any sort of a decision on, so. My question would just be to the ZBA. My review of this is, why are we just not looking at a non-conforming situation for the ZBA to review? But. We're on that. Have to try to do something, almost everybody over there has a shed that's a foot from the property line, so. Again, the pictures they provided, you can see other ones. I don't know that, we're not gonna be able to get any more information on this, so, I mean, it's a ZBA case, we're just gonna have to, it's a shed. The ZBA will sort it out in short notice, I'm sure. So, entertain a motion to defer to the zoning board of appeals, specifying the question why a variance versus just a typical non-conforming.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? None, call for roll call vote, Wayne?
I, Wayne Dennison.
Matthew Ray, aye.
Lawrence Roy, I.
Kristen Rapp, aye.
Scott Castagrande, aye.
Take up wrong.
Jen Chuck, I.
Okay. Next item we've got is minutes from September 23rd, 2024. I didn't put it on this. They were in, right, so. Okay, would I care to make a motion on that one?
From planning board, the minutes of September 23rd, 2024.
Second,
Second.
okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote, Wayne?
Wayne, I.
Matthew Ray, aye.
Lawrence Roy, I.
Kristen Rapp, aye.
Scott Castagrande, aye.
Hey, aye.
Jen Chuck out abstain, I wasn't here.
Planning board photo for annual town report. I think we'll wait till the very end and take care of that. We'll keep Wayne on the screen and we'll get in front of Wayne. Yeah.
We can get somebody to do, Photoshop or something.
There we go. Target photoshopping skills.
All right, next item on the agenda is an informal conceptual review for 286 North Street. I believe, Mr. Casey, you were here for this one, correct?
That would be me, Mark Casey, Century Survey Consultants, for anybody that doesn't know me. We have a parcel off North Street, it's a little over 3 acres. The nice young couple that owns the house, it's a very modest little house. They want to put an addition on, they have a young family, they made it to Duxbury, now they're trying to improve their property. They have over 3 acres and the only way they can do it is to sell a portion of it. So we only have 85 feet of frontage. Okay, so our subdivision rules and regulations require a 50-foot wide right of way with 30-foot roundings on either side, the actual street layout lines. Okay. That would add up to 110 feet. And since we only have 85 feet, we can't put a rounding on this side. If this was a 5, 10, 15, 20 lot subdivision, I suppose you could say, well, the rounding's really necessary because what about when we get a bad winter and snow plowing? This would create one lot for new construction. So the reason I'm here is I don't want to spend a lot of anybody's money. Okay, to develop definitive subdivision plans and then find out that you won't entertain granting us the waiver. This section of the subdivision rules and regulations is 7.3.4A. And it requires two things. It requires the actual street layout lines to have roundings. That's what I need the waiver for. The other part of that same section requires the paved surface have a 30-foot radius rounded. That I can meet with no problem whatsoever. So it's simply the road layout where I can't make the rounding.
You can't make the rounding there, and you can't finish off the cul-de-sac circle.
I don't think I need a waiver for that.
That's come up recently, so I was questioning.
And again, this is,
Well, theoretically, you could probably come in and bend it a little and get.
if I had to, I
Yeah.
could.
So, could you just explain again why you can't round the bottom one? I didn't understand your reference to 86 feet.
Okay, so between the property lines, okay, we only have frontage of 85 feet. Okay. To put the roundings in, okay, 30-foot radius, okay, that's 30 feet. The road layout, okay, is 50 feet. And then on the other side, the other rounding is 30 feet, so that adds up to 110 feet. We only have total, we only have 85 feet to work with. And again, this is, 3 lots or less in our regulation. Calls for a 14-foot wide traveled way with a 1.5 berm on either side. So
What is the lot right below it? It seems like it's a very large lot.
well,
Can't really tell.
it's in this line right here, the green line. Okay, the Aquifer Protection District,
Yeah.
okay, is from the green line southeasterly, okay?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to argue about whether or not we needed 60,000 square feet. We had
Just
the
get-
luxury of having a little over 3 acres, so I could make this lot 60,000 square feet plus and still have the lot that would eventually support the construction of a new single-family home is over 51,000 square feet.
Is the land just to the bottom there, below what you're doing? Is that already a developed house on the next?
To the south, yeah, to the south.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes,
Okay, so there's already a house
There's-
on that lot.
but the house is way over here. There's wetlands in here.
Would they talk to the neighbor and
Well,
or do a land purchase or something like
yeah,
that?
just, they could buy a sliver off the neighbor, they could get in, right?
I'm looking at the,
The topography.
according to what I'm seeing on the web right now, the abutting property to the south is conservation land owned by the town.
Oh, that's the town's land?
Yeah, the closest house is,
On the other side of the conversation.
So the next property south, where they would need to get something from to be able to do this is actually town conservation.
and it's not gonna happen.
That's not gonna, no, but
I mean,
I was just, I
I
wasn't
can't say
sure.
100%, but having lived here for 39 years.
No, that's not likely to happen. Okay. I mean. My only issue with. This is that it's somewhat similar to one we just recently saw.
Or the church. Right.
Yeah, and. Are we getting overly creative trying to figure out ways to get more lots in town? Versus just
Yeah,
sticking with the rules.
If I can't meet the standard, I can't meet the standard.
And it's a pretty standard, I mean,
Yeah.
we've required this for everybody.
I did not bring any examples with me, but this is not the first time this has been done in Duxbury by any stretch of the imagination.
That there was, what, a waiver for the. That or just simply
Around-
not enough space at all for town.
There had to have been, this scenario has been done multiple times in Duxbury. Not on your watch, maybe, okay, but it's been done multiple times. There's,
Waiving the additional 30 feet for one side of the.
Yes.
turnout. put that on, into account, and find out where those have been. That would be a bit too much research in the weeds and everything, so. I don't know, I think I had the same concern I had with the last one that came. As far as, that situation, we were able to be provided with some examples of it, obviously, I think.
I'd be happy
Take a
to
look
do
at
that.
it. And, I think as our board would be willing to take a look at. What might have been done before, so that we can see what reasoning was used to come to that decision that time. That would help us do this
Well, I think one of the
as
things.
best we can.
One of the things that we've talked a little bit about too is feedback we've gotten from fire and safety about having the truck come into that space, and that would be challenging for that second lot potentially.
I don't think so at all.
I think all you're gonna build there is a driveway, right? To the second.
It's gonna be a hell of a driveway. It's
It's
gonna be about 14 feet wide. It's gonna have a 1.5 foot Cape Cod berm. By way of example, Cooper Hill Road, we have a 20 foot wide road with a 1 foot Cape Cod. This will be 14 feet wide, 1.5 feet, so total 17 feet back of berm to back of berm. It will come in, and we're not gonna do a conventional cul-de-sac because 3 lots or less, we're allowed to do a T turnaround.
Yeah.
Okay, with the blessing of the board.
Yeah. The reality is all this road driveway is gonna do is go to one house.
Correct.
Uh,
And you're gonna make it possible for these folks to improve their
Where is
improve their house.
Where is their driveway currently?
There is an existing right of way. You can see the dash line. And that's currently where the driveway comes in.
At the risk of being creative, I want to ask the question, because this parcel abuts conservation land on both sides in the newly proposed subdivision of the second parcel in the back is now essentially fallow and contiguous with conservation. Do you know if the owners considered offering parcels to town?
I can't say 100%, but I would bet a serious amount of money that they did not
Mhm.
offer to the town.
If they're looking to actually gain some income to be able to improve their property, maybe this is an option that would make sense.
It would certainly eliminate the need for this additional access driveway, paving, engineering. And if the town were willing to meet a market price, I don't see any reason why you would want to bias it towards it.
I think that the chances of that deal happening with the town are probably slim to none.
It's worth an ask.
It's worth asking a question.
At that point, they don't have to do any development of it either.
Right.
They get what they have now. They don't get another neighbor in the back. I would think it'd be in their interest.
If it was realistic, I would agree. I'm just,
Yeah, well, again, I'm for you to think or so, as far as reality, it's a personal decision. And
We'll come down to would the town be able to, would the town pony up for an acre and a half? What an acre and a half is worth?
here's my experience with things like this, okay? Every year, there's a lot of people in town that have land, okay, that is not all buildable uplands. And they're looking for a way to turn it into money. Okay? So by October 15th, then they get on the list for CPC. Okay, and Joe Brady used to tell me that he basically did triage every year. Okay, it's like, okay, looking out for the interest of the town, what parcels that we want to fund? This would be towards the bottom of any list, every
It's
single
not
year.
that large.
Correct. Or strategically, yes, and it's working. So, I mean, this is, everything is individual, everything you do here is, site specific. So just because you grant a waiver on one particular site specific project doesn't mean you're bound and determined to grant it on another project.
True, then that leads back to, you give us examples of some other ones, and they don't make it,
Yeah, well, I'm
Don't
not
make it the
saying, I'm
rule.
not,
so.
and again, I'm not saying they were on your watch.
Yeah.
But they do exist in Duxbury. probably come up with 4 or 5 in a half an hour.
So what if they actually shifted, the whole, the road, northeast, so that there's actually like land, there was land on the left side, would that allow them to get their curve on the lower left?
No, they only have 85
They only
feet.
have 85 feet and they need 110.
Okay, so
To the
that's,
streets.
yeah, okay,
There's-
yeah, sorry.
The street's just this small amount that they have, and so that whole thing doesn't fit in the 85 feet.
If there was a way to do it, I would have found it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, this is basically informal review. I wouldn't mind seeing some of the other examples. That have been in town, and we can look them up and see what the decisions were on those and why.
Sure.
And then we'll be. See what we can consider from there. That's, I think,
Can I get on the agenda for 2 weeks? Is that?
again, in 2 weeks, open enough, right?
We have the public hearing for the MBTA and one for a subdivision, but I can put it at the beginning.
Okay, so we do it at the beginning, and get you out of the way for
Yeah, that'd be
the
great.
rest of it. I mean, I'm not saying we're gonna be sitting there for an approval at that point, because it's still gonna be somewhat informal. Before you
Well, it
propose,
is.
we can tell you whether to propose it or not at that point.
Yeah, I'm all about, I don't wanna spend somebody's
Yeah,
money, but
no, I
find out at the
I
end
don't
of
want,
the
I don't wanna
road.
waste anybody's money for no reason, so. If you show us that, and you can come up with a reasonable explanation to get it done, and we'll see what we can do.
All right, thank you for your time. I'm gonna hang out because you're gonna look at a subdivision road that I did.
Okay, excellent. So, next item we have is Cooper Hill Street acceptance. Recommendation to the select board relative to layout of Cooper Hill Road as a public way, and I think we already voted this one once, right? And what did we do wrong?
I don't know.
I still can't figure out what we did wrong.
Procedural.
I don't think it was the planning board. I think it was, I don't know exactly what it was. Rainey told me in our meeting, it was a procedural defect. I think it was something to do with the registry of deeds or something, I'm not
Something
sure.
wasn't filed at the, when it was
Something,
supposed to be.
yeah, I don't know the specifics of it, but it was not on this level. I do know that.
Okay, so but we just need to revote
Gotta go through the whole process again.
requesting, okay.
Make a motion. Make a motion to, recommend to the select board to approve the layout of Cooper Hill Road as a public way.
Second,
Second.
any discussion?
I understand from the vote, I wasn't on the board and it wasn't
That's
originally
fine.
approved, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll be a four. Seeing none, call for the vote, and did we lose Wayne?
He was on the call, it was like.
I, Wayne Dennison.
Okay, excellent.
That'd be right, I.
Hope you were there. You
We do
were-
need to abstain.
Oh, do I, oh, that's what I was asking, do I need to abstain, because I wasn't?
I don't think you have to, this is just a recommendation to accept a road.
Oh,
You
look,
don't need,
then, aye.
okay,
Lawrence, all right, aye. Kristen Raff, aye.
Scott Castagrande, aye.
Okay, Gardner, Ryan.
Jen Charcota.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, next item we have up is the housing production plan update.
Hey,
And we have a representative here to help us.
Danny Coughlin, 30 Deacon's Path, but I sure about. That's a, let me pass something out here for you.
Thanks.
You might recall about 6 weeks ago, we had a presentation by Lynn Sweet, who has drafted the housing production plan. And at that point, Housing Trust had a number of questions, I think someone raised the planning board, also had a number of questions. Then went back to the drawing board and has presented a second draft of that report. That I think was circulated back in the middle of September. What I've given you here is something that's coming from that report, but before that, I just want to make a couple of comments. One is that, you know, the whole purpose of this obviously is to do two things. One is to update the town on its housing affordability, how much we have or what the gap might be. The second, and perhaps even more important, is that this document, once it's approved by the Housing Trust, approved by the Planning Board, and then subsequently approved by the Select Board, goes to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and Cities. And it's then, if they approve it, it allows the town to look at a project, 40B project, and put it on its own zoning requirements. Now, if we don't have a housing production plan in place, a developer is able to take any zoning commitment or zoning restriction, go to the state and have the state overrule us. So having this production plan, you know, gives us some safety, you know, from the zoning perspective. That's part of what, you know, the real genesis of this is all about. It's not every 5 years. This is an update of the 2019 plan. If you go into the plan and look at it, it looks an awful lot like the 2019 plan, except that it's been updated for a number of things, most importantly, demographics. And as you look through the demographics, you know, what we find is that housing affordability in Duxbury has gotten worse, you know, not a surprise to anybody. Prices have gone up, you know, interest rates are high, incomes haven't kept pace with the price of housing, not just in Duxbury, but you know, across the anywhere. So that's an issue, you know, not one that we're gonna solve, but we're gonna try and help, you know, reduce that gap. What we're trying to do here is, you know, look at the housing production plan. Question comes up whether or not how does it tie into the comprehensive plan for the town? And the comprehensive plan is a much more expansive document. It covers an awful lot of things relative to the town's, you know, just the physical environment, the facilities of the town, the overall operation of the town. The housing production plan is much more focused. It's focused on housing, but affordable housing. The comprehensive plan has a section on housing, but it's housing in a broader sense, and it's not limited to just the affordable housing. The plan we have here has, I haven't given it to you, but to the information in the plan itself, has an extensive amount of demographic information about the town. Again, more ways of parsing what we are, who we are than I could ever imagine. But the most important part from my perspective is this plan, you know, gives us a roadmap for doing things in the future. It gives us some programs, initiatives, some different resources and opportunities that we can pursue in order to help with affordable housing in the town. It doesn't, however, provide dictates. It's not asking or directing or saying, you should do this, you should do that. It's more on the lines of you could do this, you should think about that. And what I've done here is pieces I pulled out just because wasn't going to sit here and ask you to read a 97-page document and you know, give me your opinion. But I thought a couple of things you can look at at your leisure and we'll give you a good sense of the plan. But the first part was, you know, just to focus on what a production plan is. Again, it's, you know, makes progress on that 40B statute. It considers the affordability gap. And a lot of people focus on these plans and they say it's all about the 10% and getting to 10% and the 40B restriction going away. It's not. It's about understanding the affordability. This 40B, even if we were at 10%, doesn't solve the problem. You know, it's a much more extensive problem. This plan helps to identify things that help with affordability in a general sense. I showed you, I extracted the information on the affordability gap, just as an example of, you know, what people are suggesting, how deep and how large that chasm is between what people can afford and what people are actually paying for prices. I was amazed when I saw, you know, a family of 4 with an average income in this town, $163,000, you know, can't afford, you know, the 3-bedroom house that got sold last year for $900,000. You know, what they can afford is more in the order of $350,000. So it's about a $500,000 gap, you know, pretty expensive. And again, you know, the plan and, you know, what we're trying to do is not necessarily going to solve that problem, you know, hopefully make a dent in it. The last 2 pages, again, are extracted from the report. I think they give you a sense of, you know, the approach that the report takes. You know, page 14, I pulled out the housing goals, and they are preserve and expand the supply of, units. And it gives you some detail on that. It's focus on the development of more housing. Provide smaller, attainable priced housing and prime style developments that are in keeping with the town character. That's an important point that is in this plan that wasn't there before. Before, we were just talking about the affordability and the need for affordability. What we're talking about now is smaller developments, prime style developments. We're also talking about developments, not just for people that are lower income, but to try and attract younger people back into town. You know, the sons and daughters of, of people in town who are, they've gone to college or, now established themselves, they want to come back to town. And another constituent we're looking at is the elderly, people who have big houses, perhaps can't afford those houses anymore, or they want to stay in town, they want something smaller. We also, at the Housing Trust level, are focusing on a couple of other cohorts. One is veterans, another is, people with disabilities, autism is one in particular. We're looking at opportunities to develop properties, smaller properties, again, in keeping with the town's character, that would meet the needs of those people. So what this is showing you is some of the things that are being suggested in the plan. The most substantial, I think, here in this housing page, is the last one, exploring the hiring of an administrator to facilitate the attainment of the objectives with a focus on the following items. A housing, coordinator, at the town level, something that was kicked around a lot at the housing trust level. We've had conversations with Rennie, that's perhaps something that could happen, at some point in time. It's not gonna happen overnight, but, based on a discussion that we should have with the planning board, with the zoning board, what, things could a housing coordinator do? How does it impact what you do? How is it complementary to what you do? How is it complementary to what the planning director does? So a lot of work that needs to be done there, but it's something that, again, the plan brought out as an opportunity, something we should be thinking about. Again, at the town level. And then the last page, and I'm not gonna bore you with reading it all, but, some of the things that the plan focuses on. Education capacity and building strategies, zoning and planning strategy. So again, it touches on zoning as well as planning and affordable housing, and then preservation strategies. Again, a new thing, more topical in today's environment than it was 5 years ago. And then lastly, housing production, strategies. Some of which we've already done, some of which we're trying in the past, some of which we're trying again in the future. Particularly things like partnering with private developers. That has that whole host of things that could be happening in that particular area. But these are some of the things that are coming out of the report. Again, it's almost like a checklist for all of us to look at and say, these are the things we ought to think about, accessory dwelling units, obviously something that's very topical, people are talking about right now. They put it in here, it's like no surprise that we should be doing something like that. But it's more of a guide and I think a town-wide effort, not just something that comes from the Affordable Housing Trust. I've had a conversation with Renee as well about the housing production plan and where it lies in terms of responsibilities. In most towns, it's done by the planning director. A lot like the subsidized housing inventory, it's usually maintained by the planning director. This year, the Affordable Housing Trust is kind of falling into the gulf and is working on these things, trying to bring them up to speed, obviously because we haven't had a planning director. But at some point, we'd be happy to transition back the responsibility for doing these things to the planning department and the planning board. But in the interim, we're happy to get it done and try and move this thing forward. What we need at your convenience is your approval of the plan. So that we're gonna take it to the select board, and I would envision having Lynn Sweet make the presentation to the select board as she did to us with the trust. And hopefully get them to approve it, but the next step, again, for us is to solicit your consent. The Housing Trust voted the other day to endorse the plan. We did make, one particular caveat that, the real outstanding issue that's not treated in the plan is, how big are these cohorts? How many people would come back to town if the property available to them? We don't know that the housing authority knows how many people are applying for their properties and for their, particular needs. We have no idea, how many autistic people there are, how many disabled people there are, how many elderly people there are, it would help us to know that so that we can be sure that we're devoting and directing the resources we have towards those particular areas. You know, getting that information, you know, some of it's anecdotal, you know, some of it perhaps is out there in the world. We talked to Lynn Sweet, she said, of course, she'd be happy for a fee to help us figure that out. But we haven't gotten to that point. But that to me is the biggest outstanding issue, you know. We're trying to do all these things, we want to make sure that we're focused in the right direction. So that and the availability of land to do what we're trying to do is probably the two biggest and most critical issues. So without drilling any further, going you further with this one. That's what we're trying to do. We need your consent at some point. I'd look for direction from you as to what steps, if any, you'd like us to take in terms of meeting again, getting Lynn Sweet, you know, to come in again, or do you think you have enough information to, at some point in time, the not too distant future, hopefully, you know, give us your consent? And I feel a little out of place asking for you to consider something when I look at all the other things that you've got on your agenda. Compared to the MBTA, we look like, yeah, real small potatoes here, but it is something that's important.
Something we need to have in place, and needs to.
Yeah, we need it in place, and work is there, and hopefully it's, it met our, you know, objectives and needs, hopefully to be sure as well.
Excellent.
That's it.
When's the, we have any plan to have a formal review of what's there, or oh, procedurally, what we need to do with this? The select board is the one who ultimately approves this.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we just make a recommendation to them. Technically, so, and the plan we have, it's out of date, but is it out of filing with?
Yeah.
It is,
It expired in April.
okay. Okay. And you use who was the consultant?
Lynn Sweet, LDS Consulting, they did the 2019 plan as well.
That's right, So the 19 plan, they did the updates to all of this.
Right.
Awesome, okay. And your group's all set with it, at this point. Okay. So,
Dan, I want to thank you for coming back and for sharing this and for putting these pages together. It's funny, I actually read through the summary, the 16 pages. And I printed out the same sheets that you provided, so I really,
good.
like, we're on the same wavelength here, so.
Good.
Really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the thought that went into this. We're so fortunate to have such good stewards in our community who are so thoughtful and caring of this particular group that is not, whose needs are not met in our community. And I read the same statistics and I was, yeah, you know, it's quite astounding what it takes to be able to afford a house that's an average price house here in town. So thank you for all the efforts that you've done. I think one of the things that I was most interested in was some zoning and planning strategies, because that's one of the ways that we can support your group. And there are a couple of things and that essentially that were being asked as I read it. And that was to amend the accessory dwelling unit provision of the bylaw, and then also to look at the inclusionary housing provision. And so I just want to make sure that you know that we are working on those. We've actually referred that to the town council and asked her to draft us a bylaw. So I think that that will help. And I think we talked about a little bit about like cluster houses or small cottages. I think that right now, we don't have any mechanism to do that. So I think potentially that, and I think that we've heard loud and clear from the Envision Duxbury that people want diversity of housing, whatever that form that takes. So I think that these efforts and your support can go a long way. Also, if your group is interested in the MBTA, if they feel like they can support the MBTA community bylaw when we get to that point, that might be helpful to have them come in to speak to that. At the public hearing, because that's, you're such strong proponents of this particular community.
We did go to the first MBTA public hearing and talked a little bit about the affordability, and I think that, you know, I presented on that. But, you know, what's interesting in the comments you made, I think were emblematic of this document is not a, you know, stake on the ground, this is everything we need to do. It's a fluid document, I mean, it's probably out of date now, the cost of housing is probably different than what it is survey. And so the needs are ever evolving and changing, and, you know, I hope that everybody looks at this again as a town-wide document, not just the Affordable Housing Trust. It's just, it's a roadmap to get to someplace in the future. It's not perfect.
Right.
And a lot will evolve, both in terms of the data as well as the process.
I know, I think in our last meeting, we talked quite a bit about that 10% number, and I don't think it was so much that we were focused on like not being able to get to. And not having the 40B constraints, it was more about how can we as a community get to at least 7%. So I think that's something.
Quick question from a review perspective, since the same consultant did the 2019 plan. Was the 2019 plan the original basis for the 2024, and if yes, would it make sense to create a red line for us to review to see the differences from our review perspective? Would Lynn be able to create, one, does it make sense, and two, would you be able to create a red line so that we can see the changes from the 2019 to the proposed 2024? And she may come back and say, they're two totally different reports, but if the 2019 served as the basis for the 2024, there may not be as many changes in it as we think.
Yeah.
Mike Hurley, 56 St. George Street, I've been sitting in representing the COA's Livable Duxbury thing on Dan's group and on the MBTA group. You can do that comparison. I think the issue, I would be drawn right to the strategy section at the end of the document. You're gonna see similar strategies coming out of Livable Duxbury, and although the master plan, 2019 town master plan, is broader than the affordable lens on this one, you're gonna see similarities there. As a matter of fact, we've been working with TAG and getting all the action conclusions out of each of them and trying to get them merged together so that we don't trip over each other. I don't know that an analysis of the numbers is that
Beneficial.
if you believe in the conclusions. But if you want to do that analysis, we could probably work on trying to help you.
Well, I could certainly ask Lynn to do that, and I'm sure that,
The format in the document is similar to what we had already in place, then there should only be limited things that we'd be reviewing. It's very much the same, other than new statistical analysis and some other added sections at the end, then
Somewhat
it's easier for us to say, okay, let's just move forward with what we already had. What we already had. And my perception is that that's the case. Well, you're bringing up a few more things, like maybe in the future we could have an administrator for this.
Right.
And it doesn't hurt to ask for any of those things. That's not binding.
when you get right down to it, the major differences are, one, this report shows what's been done since the last report.
Yeah.
Different projects have been done, up the change in the SHI, you went from 743 to 751, things like that. And it shows you obviously demographics are very different than even 5 years ago. And then the last change is that she adds a number of different programs that, are available, that weren't available 5 years ago. And it's taken out some of the things that were proven to be, unreasonable. That's the nature of it.
Right.
It was interesting, we put out, went to bid on with this, had 3 bids. One from MAPC for $67,000, another from a third party, you can't recall the name, $87,000, and this bid was $22,000. So,
That tells me she used what she already had. Which is not a problem.
Not a surprise,
That's
yeah.
fine.
I mean, the charts look the same, the numbers are different.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, those were the numbers, I think, in relative terms, when we did it, what we spent, when we had it first done, so.
Yeah.
That's why it made sense to go back to it.
And was Rennie open to some type of an administrator, or was he hoping to come back to the planning director?
Brent, a good conversation with Randy. He suggested that it was a good idea, but not for this time meeting. And he did say, specifically that the new town, the planning director and the role that the planning director has is probably going to be changed, from what it had been in the past. And he said, I had given him a proposed job description. I said, this is what the plan, would look like based on the housing production plan. The job would look like these things. And he said, he said, there are half a dozen things in there I'd rather have the planning director do. And so we said, let's get the planning director in place, see what's left over, let's look at, the description we have then. See if some of those responsibilities should be, parceled out to others in town. And then you have to find what the role is. And that would even tell us whether it should be a full-time role or a part-time role, and where it should fit within town government, some people in the trust were a little concerned about, well, two things. One is, what kind of reaction will we get? Is this the right time? Renee also said that, there are probably half a dozen, personnel, requirements that are coming for town meeting, police, fire, and others. And he said, let's not confuse it with this as well. So,
Yeah.
I think there's support for it, but I think the timing is important.
Until we have a permanent town planner, every town planner has different strengths and weaknesses too, so we have to see.
Yeah.
Who we have and what we have.
I would also point out that Fernando, retired, is our select board representative. He wanted to push it forward this year, and he spoke to me about that last week. I said, let's sit down and talk to Renee. I said, I think he has good reason and a rational approach to this. If we've got his support, and have to wait a year and define the job more specifically, I think that's probably a good idea.
When partially the planning department, we working somewhat on a secondary town planner as well, so that would potentially mean if that person's taking some of these things away, the other person has more time. So I think it could be back in the planning department. It probably rationally, we should be able to do it, and if the planning department is split into two segments as far as having two planning director and assistant planning director, or however that's going to be hashed out, it might just be somebody that does coastal resiliency. That frees up time for the other person to be able to do some of these other things. So ideally, that would be where we would land it again. And we always say, oh, once we finish up all these other projects, but then there's 10 other projects that come along too, so it never ends. So,
The other part of that is the plan also talks about the idea of having a cross-town group that would be responsible for implementing the housing production. And so that would include zoning, planning, housing authority, and others that haven't yet, thought about. Again, that's something that, once we had a planning director in place, we had to find the role of the housing administrator, figure out where that goes, and then how does that work with this kind of oversight group that is responsible for making sure that we do, go through this list and we do check stuff off, decide whether or not that's a good idea or bad idea, and how do we implement it, to do it some of the time.
Can I speak to that for a second? Sure, because that brought that up actually in open forum, so I'm glad that you're bringing it in here, because we have this. Mentioned that there are these bylaw changes that are coming down the pipe. We're talking about now. You will be acted on in the spring. Inclusionary may well also be acted on in the spring. So it concerns me that the plan recommends formation of an implementation committee. And implementation is in motion.
Yeah.
How can the planning board help you to put that implementation committee in place? So that there is a body there that's focused on this, that's not the housing trust and it's not the planning board. There needs to be a separate dedicated.
Well, I think that, hopefully, at some point you approve the plan, we present it to the select board, they've approved it. Then it goes to EOHLC, they approve it, and then we're up and running, and then we sit down and decide, I think that's probably the first thing.
We gotta push it through the approval process.
We've got a few other hurdles to get through.
Well, so it's my experience that those committees are formed as an active town meeting. So when the warrant opens, I would hope that the production plan was through its approval chain and other trusts would be poised and ready, their coordination with the planning board to frame that act.
You're also gonna have some maturation of the overproductory work. They'll can play and the resources there to be brought to bear, albeit volunteer then.
And has any thought been given, I have to think every other community around us has the same, something similar, right?
Well, the 87 of the 350 towns is probably.
That's it, I would have thought it was everybody, okay.
There's some that exempt, I think, of the percentage of land in the town is open space and, not developable. which would include a lot of the towns in the western part of the state,
Okay,
and so
gotcha.
some of them don't. But everything, you know, if you were to look at a map around Boston, you know, just about it.
Because I was actually wondering, would it make sense to partner with another town to actually share, have, you know, have somebody works a couple of days here, because somebody works, but so that they're an expert and they can. That could be shared, but maybe it's not a full-time position. Would that be easier to fund it that way?
Well, obviously, that was a question Randy had about how do you fund this, and, you
Yeah.
know, is it a CPC kind of thing, or is it, you know, a town administrator, a town, economic cost? Marshfield has a part-time planner, you know, part-time administrator. Barnstable has one, and it's done a great job in a lot of these initiatives, it's kind of interesting. Chris Ryan actually introduced us to Barnstable, and we're able to talk to them about, you know, how successful that program has been for them. So it's good, I think it's worth exploring, and I think there's a time and a place for it, and this is perhaps the wrong time, but the right place.
Okay. Well, I think I hope you know that you have our support, so we appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
I think maybe if we can. Well, we all have it now, right? But we got it. We received that in an email not that long ago. We want to do a review through it and see if we want to get that over to out of our hands, so you can go to the select board. Be able to do that, I would think. They think we can get that done for the next meeting?
I've read through it, I think it's
Yeah.
great, I'm good to go, but if the rest of the group wants more time, I'm glad to.
You're good to go now? Okay.
But I don't want to pressure anyone.
I'm also very familiar with it, put it in on it.
I mean, I've read through it, I just don't know how many people have read it, so.
Well, if you do suffer from insomnia, it is great.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Okay, that's fine. If you Make a motion.
Page 47 of your sleep.
Does anybody want more time? I'd like more time.
Okay.
I'm good. I don't know that we're in a rush, I mean, I know that you want to get the approval done, but.
I want him to be able to keep moving.
Yeah.
But I will offer, if there are questions anyone has, and you want to send me an email, you know, do my best to get the answer. We can still modify the report, if there's something.
See anything in there that jumped out,
Yeah.
these are the results, this is
Yeah.
done, you guys and then the consultants. I might argue with numbers, I can't argue with figures that come out.
There was a chart before, is that still in there? I couldn't figure out, I didn't go through every page, I went with the summaries. Is there a chart in there about numbers or percentages? Number of units that are currently in the list and.
Yeah. Yeah, that SHI is, subsidized housing inventory is included,
Okay,
with all the properties, it's broken down between rentals and ownership.
I'll go with that.
The real challenge is, Dan said, is sizing the categories of demand.
Yeah.
So that you can, I mean, you can't plan to build everything for everybody.
Yeah, and then nobody signs up for it.
What is interesting though, in some of the work that we've done, when you bring up an idea, for instance, autism, somebody said, oh, well, maybe there's a need for autistic housing. And there are a number of people with autism in Duxbury. It's just a surprise. We also talk about veterans, and talk to the veterans agent. There are a number of veterans, you know, that need housing, you know. We sometimes don't think about those, but again, the question is, are they the most needy populations that we have? Yeah, I'm not sure we're ever gonna get a real
Never
good
get it,
answer.
right.
It's like asking the realtors, you know, how many people come into your office and say, oh, I can't afford this town, see you later.
Yeah.
But they'd otherwise qualify to live in whatever town,
Mhm.
so, never know some of those answers.
We're starting to pull people like the community services, people here that people come into and ask about, and give the anecdotal feedback. The vets are veterans. Discover things like there's a group of veterans widows that have a lot of difficulty in this. I think, you know, 3-6 months from now,
Yeah.
they've gathered some stuff that's a little more action.
Right.
We're always gonna have an affordability issue because of that thing called the coast. And everybody wants to live.
Going into too much detail, but it's interesting to note that the average policeman, average firefighter, and average town employee would be considered low income, housing. Their income levels are between 55 and 122,000, and the 80% level on 160 is like 135. So they're all, considered low income.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll see, I don't want to put too much on the next agenda. We have a lot on. We did in the end of the business.
You're gonna do the meeting after that?
I don't know the date off the top of my head, but it would be November.
And November 4th, we third. We'll meet on 7th because the holidays 13th. In and around that one there.
Meeting on October 21st. And then. Probably the 5th of November.
That's Veterans Day. Special meeting is 18th, it's Monday.
You just let me know what's
Isn't that
ready for the agenda. That'd be great.
November 18th.
So it might be November 4th, is that maybe the meeting?
I'll double check with.
They just
Susan
said,
on how that would.
town meeting for the 18th, on Monday the 18th. I didn't know the opportunity.
So you mind giving us a little bit more time to review it?
So we're out of compliance now, but again, there's nothing pending, so it's not.
Yeah, it's not holding anything up.
Yeah, we're not holding anything up. And again, just offer to answer any questions. that anyone has.
Okay, appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next thing. Subdivision rules and regulations, general codes, editorial and legal analysis. Homework to look at. Anybody good? Yeah. I would be. Yeah. Okay. I mean, if everybody just needs more time with it. Take more time, I mean. We can only get to, we can get to it, we get it to it, so. Everybody need more time?
I've gone through it, but more time, but how, like, what is our process? Are we gonna just go through and when everybody's had a chance to review, are we gonna just quickly
I
run
think
through
we
each
would
question?
run through the questions and
Okay,
get everybody's
Come
income
to a
on it and then
consensus
come up
on
with a
each one.
consensus answer for them.
Yep.
Yep. In fact, I mean, what I did, I sent mine over to Emily. And
there was one, Emily, that I had a question on that you made, had to do with fees. Do
yeah, the fee review,
we need any update to the filing fees? I just had a question mark, and I wasn't sure of that one.
we're going over that,
We updated the fees last year.
was it last year or the year before? Last year?
I think it was last year.
They were updated recently, I don't think we need to play around with them anymore. It's one of those things, okay, greater fees brings a little more money to the town, but in the meantime, we should be looking out for the citizens of the town, why should they pay more? And I mean, some of them are the developers. So, we don't feel as badly for them, but at the same time. Oh, good costs get passed on to everybody. But we just recently did, so. Probably, I don't know if we should rack our brains on those anymore at this point, so they're done, so. That's usually something we revisit every 3 to 5 years.
You brought up the subject of fees, so on that topic, I'll mention that I had an exchange with Mary McKinnon. Cause I was thinking when I caught you on this, and Scott, the ADU. And the potential short-term rentals. As it relates to ADUs, because those two could interact potentially. So I provided a very rudimentary calculator based on number of rentable units and tax rates and things like that. So I'll be having a conversation with Mary on Friday about that, and that's really more for me to learn where she is. What they've been talking about on the Sustainable Budget Task Force.
Yeah.
But as we all know, the budget is ugly. So as far as potential sources of revenue, particularly in light of the losses of beach revenue. It's not a short-term solution, but it could, over the longer term, if the town were to approve short-term rentals, generate.
Mhm.
I just want to let you know that's in play. If you guys want to hear about it, we can put it on the agenda.
Maybe we give us an update next, we can do with her. We can disseminate it into
Sure.
planning department too, and then we can get out to all of us. From there, just, even if it's just an FYI.
Send you the notes.
Okay, so we'll take a little bit more time on this unless everybody. Because I don't think everybody feels they're ready for dealing with this piece of the puzzle. It's separate from the bylaws, a whole different document, so. We'll do it in, we'll do it in those. Not gonna be the next meeting, obviously. May not be the one after. So. Okay. Beyond that, that's the end of the agenda.
Just so I can write down, what are the upcoming meeting dates or the applicable dates for the MBTA?
Wednesday,
Yeah, this the ninth tag is at, what time was that? That's at
5.
There
That's
was
a Zoom meeting.
Emily attached a whole sheet of dates.
Oh,
Did that help?
it's in here?
Right, Emily attached and,
You sent us these this morning.
Or Rebecca, did you just email it to me?
I might have.
It might have been Emily, did you ask?
I've been trying to send it to as many people as I get to know everyone and
Yeah.
collecting information.
Here it comes.
yeah, do you want to take a look at this? I just got all.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that'll help.
Well, I mean, the key public date,
So we can send it to
from
everyone.
Matt, for your information, the key public date is the October 17th open house.
Yeah.
That's really the next
And we,
event.
are we downstairs for that?
That is scheduled to be at the high school in presentation room. The open house.
The open.
I know, I have a
Yes, not the public, yes, the 17th, got it.
Yep.
Public.
This board has a public hearing on the 21st.
21st.
And at that, at your, at the open house, have you read the open house?
Hmm.
Is it going to be like a public, are you treating it like a public hearing, is it going to be planning to treat it like a public hearing, or is it going to be a presentation? What's the
Yes,
fact?
it's gonna be a presentation, and the idea that's been bandied about that we have to finalize is to actually almost do a dry run. Now, you have 2 microphones on stands, microphone, moderator, here's your question, your comment. Go through. Could even hold mock vote at the end,
Yeah,
just for fun.
just for fun.
Wow.
Practice makes perfect.
Yeah. Okay, all right, very good. So the dates are coming up quick. It'll be here before we know it.
So is there anything you need from us, or do you want us or the select board to say anything at that meeting to present? I mean, we haven't had a public conversation other than briefly tonight.
Mhm.
I think we're planning to have a working session on Wednesday at 5.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Okay,
So
so,
hopefully we can hash out the bylaw.
Yep.
99.9% at that point.
yeah,
Where's that meeting tag?
just got added today. It's what's brand new.
Oh, no, but where? Oh, I did see that.
It's a Zoom one for the
Yeah,
5th,
yeah,
yeah.
For the 5th, okay.
I mean,
The 9th, right?
9 at 5, 9 at 5.
It's very.
It's a lot.
I can't. I'm moving it.
Matt, I was
Do we have
like,
any feedback?
I don't know what to do with
From
that.
JCC?
So, and I know I can't make the 7th now, so I'm not gonna make that one.
you know, I'm amazing.
Anything from
My
what
gosh,
was
that's work.
planning to come out
So
of
that, well, I don't know, I
This
don't
is
know,
oral arguments.
SJC was deciding today or who's?
No, it's just oral arguments.
This oral.
Yeah.
How long could
And,
it?
and just to be clear, I mean, that is a strict, I don't know, Wayne's on, I'm not a litigation attorney, more on the residential, real estate finance part, but that, one of the main things that they're looking at is Milton's making the argument that it's optional, meaning that if they want to not go down that route, then they have the right to not adopt the regulation, and they suffer the repercussions, meaning the no grants, and the no funding.
No funding.
The state's saying it's not optional, and the Attorney General has the right to
And why is there
enforce
a
it.
penalty?
That's right,
So
so,
we wouldn't have a penalty unless it was optional.
But that's, I feel like that's the way it was presented.
It's presented as you have an option, you take the penalty. They can't have a penalty.
there's been many amicus briefs, filed on both sides, of the matter.
It's
so
messy.
interesting. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
easy.
So when is it likely, how long do they, is it like months?
I
How
have a
long do
feeling-
they usually
Actually, I was gonna go, they'll speed this one through because
impact?
It affects so many.
There's a time that is.
so, we'll see.
Interesting.
There was a good article in Massachusetts Latest Weekly that I tried to forward to the group on it, but you would have all had to sign it.
Oh,
A subscription. I tried to even save it as a PDF and it wouldn't work. Anyway, messy.
We have a picture.
Picture.
Okay, I think we can adjourn before we take any picture of that. So, entertain a motion to adjourn. It's over. Second, all right, all those in favor?
I
Aye. All right.